Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Pod This. My name is Andy Moore, I'm one of your hosts. I'm joined, as I am most every week, with Dr. Scott Melson. Hello.
What's up, dude?
How are you, sir?
Just checking the tweeter.
Excellent.
Seeing what's going on.
We're also joined to our right by Liz Charles from the Oklahoma Women's Coalition. Hello, Liz.
Hello, hello.
Does anyone call you Elizabeth?
Only my parents, and it's not ever good. So.
And people assume that's what happens with Andrew. No one has ever. My aunt calls me Andrew, but it's a term of endearment. No one else really ever does. That's about it.
Yeah, don't call me that.
I won't. No problem.
Andrew or Elizabeth.
That's either get weird.
To specify.
And then to our left here, for those of you who are watching at home, Mr. Bo Broadwater from the Journal Record. Hello.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
We have a new crew, and as we said earlier in the season, we're going to try to bring you some new voices most every week. In fact, we already have next week lined up.
We do. Look at us. We're on the ball.
If everything works out, we'll have Senator Julia Kurt and John Middendorf, who's the pastor of OKC First Church of the Nazarene. That may be the person that I've known the longest, because I met him in 1999 when I first came to college.
That's pretty impressive.
It's a long time. That was when I was just a child. 5 years old in college. I was really ahead of my time. Very much ahead. All right. Well, let's go ahead and get into our news roundup.
A lot of news this week. There's a lot. We actually kept the news roundup pretty short this week because there's so much happening in the legislature that's newsworthy. So we are going to, we say this every week, but we're actually going to keep it short and sweet. So first up, we have an article from the Tulsa World. This has to do with Epic Charter Schools. So the Epic Charter School is Oklahoma's online school. It's big. It's got several thousand students. I think over 10,000 students at this point, and is really good at a lot of things. But at the moment, it's under both state and federal investigation from the OSBI as well as the feds. And we're not going to go through.
This is not the first time, though, right?
Yeah, no. This has happened. This is like an update, not a new thing. The article is on the Tulsa World. We'll throw a link up to it on the blog. It's long, it's detailed, it's definitely worth the read. Suffice it to say that most of this investigation has to do with dual enrollment. So this is kids that are enrolled in Epic and are receiving Epic funding, but are also in private schools of some kind, and whether or not that's okay. It seems not to be okay.
Seems not okay. Yeah.
How is that even possible? I don't even is it kind of like Medicaid fraud where they're billing for it and the student doesn't know?
So it seems like there's some kids it's like they're doing some classes at Epic, but then they're also at their private school most of the time. In some cases, they're even doing work at their private school, but getting their Epic teacher is giving them credit for it. It's very it is convoluted and can times it be a little bit confusing. So that's at times can be a little confusing. So that's one reason, in addition to time, not to try and get too far into it. But it is, we talk a lot about education right now in the legislature. Charter schools are a hot topic. Vouchers are a hot topic. Making some changes to scholarships are a hot topic. So if that all concerns you, hint it should, you should go to the Tulsa World and make this one of the articles that you can get. I believe the Tulsa World gives 5 free articles a month to non-subscribers. So make this one of your 5 for the month of February.
That's fair.
And as an employee of a newspaper, I'll say go ahead and subscribe while you're at it.
Yes.
Nice plug.
Yes. I actually have in my notes to give you a shout out at the very end.
Oh,
I tell people to subscribe to the Journal Record every week.
I was going to say I'm suddenly aware that we have no Journal Record articles on our news roundup this week.
That's not intentional. I'm just trying to spread the love. We usually Bo's leaving. He's like taking this. We usually have 3. So
that's right. I think Bo listens every week. He will know if we are lying. All right. So up next is an interesting article from NonDoc about Speaker McCall and others favoring the county option for taxing aggregates.
So
aggregates meaning rocks.
Yes. So you're like, why in the world does this matter? Well, it matters if you have ever driven on a road or been in a building with a concrete foundation or had any other kind of industrial application of concrete. This matters because, right, if you've got a little project at your house, you're building a fence, you probably go to Home Depot or Lowe's and you buy a bag of concrete. If you are building a road or you are building a house or a commercial structure, you don't do that. You buy a bunch of aggregate. You buy sand, you buy rock, you buy all these materials, and you make your concrete.
You said you buy it in aggregate?
Yes. Where's the rim shot, please?
Oh, yeah, I've got one of those
You
sounds.
got a rim shot. But so this piece from NonDoc talks about how Oklahoma actually, and this may be known to a lot of you, it wasn't known to me, we produce a lot of aggregate. We have several quarries located all over the state. And if you're familiar with the term gross production tax, what Speaker McCall is proposing is actually to put a gross production tax by cubic yard. By cubic yard, I think it's 10 cents per cubic yard on aggregate.
By ton, 10 cents per ton.
Is it ton?
It was a lot of material for not much money.
Yes.
So like a typical 3 yard, which is like a semi truckload of material, would be like $2
Yeah, it was not
of additional tax. $2.17, I believe.
So this is a tax increase, which is interesting since it's being proposed by the Republican Speaker of the House.
Is there an aggregate lobby?
There is actually. So they are very staunchly against the tax.
Yes.
Probably the biggest company that I wouldn't say the biggest. The company that most people in Oklahoma are familiar with is Dolise.
Delisi.
I don't know. I
Say
don't
it
know
right.
them. Is it Delise? It's Delisi.
Yeah.
I think it's Delisi.
Del-
Man, it's a really good thing you have a woman here
That's true.
to update you on concrete things.
Dulce de leche.
So the
think
last,
that's it. That's
the
definitely
last E is not signed. Whatever. Okay, so the big concrete trucks that are blue with yellow lettering and the name starts with a D.
They're green.
They're green.
Oh my god. I guess I'm colorblind too. Apparently, so I need more whiskey.
Yeah.
Anyway, the concrete trucks with a D that are all over the place. They are, as you might expect, not in favor of this. They talked about how it's going to be a job killer. Speaker McCall actually said, "I think it's going to be a job saver." So, figure that one out. The bill is House Bill 1404. It passed out of the A and B committee, appropriations and budget from the House today, and I just have to read this Twitter thread. So the bill's being run by Representative Meredith.
This is vaguely inappropriate.
The bill's being run by Representative Humphrey, and he was asked by Representative Matt Meredith if this is this county by county option. So the tax is being levied. Counties have the option to institute the tax or not.
Humphrey wears a cowboy hat.
Yes.
Every day.
That's not a bad thing. I'm going to wear one on the podcast one of these days, but it lets you know where he's from.
But Representative Meredith asked if would a statewide, doing this statewide instead of county by county, would that be better? Representative Humphrey said that he originally tried to run this as this aggregate tax statewide. But he says, quote, "I tried to work with everyone on that, but I got monkey stomped the last time I was here. I wouldn't say it was bad monkey stomping. It was bipartisan." End quote. He was.
What is a monkey stomp?
Yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. So then asked why his bill is better than a previous version, Representative Humphrey noted, "If I twas at a county show, I'd say that my pig is going to win grand champion." End quote. I don't know that addresses issues with the bill, but indicates that Representative Humphrey feels strongly about it. It advanced out of committee 19-10, and we have an update. The term monkey stomp means the act of persecution to a male's genitalia by a swift and efficient stomp to the scrotum. So I don't know the difference between good monkey stomping and bad monkey stomping.
The's no good.
I feel like there would be no good.
That was my thought. But
I'm not even sure how monkeys factor into this.
But anyway, head over to NonDoc and check out the article on aggregate taxing. It's actually, if you're listening to this podcast, there's a decent chance that you're into policy, and this is an interesting.
I thought you were going to say monkey stomping.
Yeah, I was really worried.
There's a decent chance you're into policy wonkiness as well as politics, and this is a great juxtaposition of the two.
Shout out to Trace for capturing that quote.
Trace
Delivering on the important news.
He's tireless.
For sure.
This week, Trace has had a number of really good quotes that he's had to follow up on. There was a great juxtaposition and something we'll talk about later of the governor saying we want to promote transparency, but we're not taking questions in this press conference. like the next sentence, and I was like, whoopsie. So, all right, Scott, we are already behind.
Yeah, but these next two are really fast.
All right, go for it. I'll let you do these.
All right. So this next article is from News OK. It is behind the paywall, so I'm sorry.
So pay for it.
There you go.
Subscribe.
Pay for it. This is there are 3 bills that have passed out of the House and the Senate. 2 from the House, 1 from the Senate, all dealing with vertical oil and gas wells. So we talked some last year with OEPA, the Oklahoma Energy Producers Alliance, that they feel very strongly that producers who are drilling long lateral horizontal wells, right? These are mostly going to be the big companies, the names that most of us are familiar with. The smaller producers of vertical wells, which are the more traditional kind of straight up and down oil and gas wells, they allege that there is significant amount of damage to those vertical wells when these long lateral horizontal fracking wells are drilled. These 3 bills are bills that are designed to address that. They've all passed committee. They've also all had the title removed. If you'll remember, when the legislators take the title off of a bill, that means that before it can be signed into law, it has to not only pass, its committee of its chamber of origin, pass the other chamber, but then it has to come back to the chamber of origin and be voted on again. So taking the title off is a way to keep bills kind of moving through the process, but it's kind of a safety, like a fail safe that they can't necessarily go anywhere. The OEPA is very in favor of these bills. The OIPA, the Oklahoma Independent Petroleum Association, which is the traditional
Big oil
lobby here in the state, they are not a fan of these 3 bills. We'll see what happens. So, like I said, they've all 3 passed, but several similar measures have been introduced in the last few years, and none of them have gone anywhere. So we'll see what happens.
Cheers.
And then the very, very last piece that we have today, and I added this at the end because it's new, and I was just like, what? So this is from KJRH, which is in Tulsa. This is Channel 2 in Tulsa.
I wasn't aware that they existed.
Yeah,
Subscribe.
Yeah, right. So this is about Senate Bill 574, SB 574, and it would require every school district to create a code of ethics for teachers and spend 3 hours every year training to make sure that classes don't get political.
What?
So this is designed...
I was on board with the ethics part.
Yeah.
I mean,
who's authoring it?
This is authored by Senator... Where is it? Mark Allen. Who has?
He's also the senator who tried to slap that bond of $50,000 for protesters at the Capitol.
All right.
Yeah.
So there's a pattern.
Doesn't like teachers.
Doesn't like them.
Well, he really doesn't like it when they show up at his office, is what it seems.
You mean their office?
Yes.
That he is renting. Cool.
Well played. Well played.
That he is paid by them to live in.
Yes, exactly.
Right.
He is employed by them.
We'll throw that up on the web as well. There's not a lot of detail. The bill, it's been referred to the Education Committee. It has not been voted on yet. I don't think that it's on the agenda for this week. And for those playing the home game, if bills are not heard in committee and passed out of committee in their chamber of origin by tomorrow,
Which is the 28th.
it is game over. So there's been no vote on it yet. I've found it. There's an emergency clause on this bill. So apparently if it passes, it needs to be
right now.
Take effect within 90 days, not November 1st.
Very urgent that we don't teach.
Yeah,
politics.
teachers or students, empower them to be civically engaged.
Scott, just one follow-up question on this. Does it stipulate what or delineate what is politics that cannot be taught?
The article doesn't, and I've not read the bill text.
I'm going to go read this bill text because I'm very curious. Like, if you're not going to teach politics, what does that mean?
I try to read bill text of the stuff that I add, but I added this like 20 minutes ago.
Well, I mean, sometime, like I was reading a bill yesterday about tobacco stuff, and I read it, and I was like, wait, what? And then I read it again, like, oh no, this undoes. It was like a triple negative, right? So it's like this eliminates the piece that made something illegal to not do, and I was like, I need to float.
Too many knots.
Yeah, I was like, this. What do you want? So it worked out.
Just that is the official end of the news recap. How much time are we at?
We're at 15 minutes.
That's a record.
All right. Well, in that case, we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and do a bit of a recap on some other things that happened this week in the legislature. Stand by. Oh, I hit the wrong button, didn't I? Oh, golly. What am I trying to hit?
This is exciting.
This, is what I get for hitting the button instead of clicking. I should have just stuck with a sad trombone. It would have made more sense in hindsight. So an important thing that passed today, and this is just a quick follow-up because we've talked about it, I think, in the last 2 episodes. We have it labeled as constitutional carry. We all know that it's permitless carry.
I was in a hurry.
Do you think that's what happens at the legislature?
My bad.
So the governor signed this bill today already. This is officially Governor Stitt's first bill that he has signed into law, that anybody over the age of 18 that's not a felon or a few other exclusions can carry their firearms wherever they want to go, with the exception of places that they have to forbid it, I guess. Certain venues can't take them to Thunder games or the Capitol.
That are otherwise illegal to have a firearm.
Right.
And that takes effect November 1st.
Yes.
So,
and this pertains to all firearms, not just handguns. Someone said long guns in the debate. Long guns. I think there's also a line about machetes in there, which I may just start like Leonardo from the Ninja Turtles carrying a couple of katana blades around.
And was that Leonardo?
And brass knuckles.
It was, yeah. Oh. Yeah, Donatello had the bow staff.
I was a Michelangelo guy myself.
Oh, that guy he was cool. Raphael, though, we can all agree, was kind of a jerk.
Yeah.
He was brooding.
No, he's just a jerk.
He was brooding.
He was his little size. Anyway, it's taking me back. Yeah, so that passed off Senate floor earlier today, and then got signed into law same day.
No time.
You know, a couple things about this, and
Shoot 'em if you got 'em.
We'll not take up too much time. So there's 2 things. There's House Bill 2010, also passed off the floor of the House today. So this is actually companion legislation to go with House Bill 2597, which is permitless carry. So House Bill 2010 was written specifically to address zoos. So saying that you can't open carry, permitless carry in zoos, and also to address
no monkey stomping.
to address the gathering place in Tulsa, because both of those are places where there's Senator David said that legislation was written. It was a compromise that was agreed to because those are both places with lots of children, which I feel begs the question: if by passing permitless carry, nothing is going to change, as Senator David said over and over and over today during Q&A and during debate, and it's perfectly safe, then why is House Bill 2010 needed? Right? Like, if it's safe and nothing changes, then why do you need House Bill 2010? I'm
going to lighten this by telling a story about the zoo. I had a friend when I was in grad school the first time who worked at the zoo in the Zoo Friends office, right? Like the membership thing. And he said people brought stuff in there all the time, like weird things. And so 2 things. Someone like brought in a skunk one day and was just like, I have a donation to make. They're like, okay. And he just pulled it out of a sack and put it on the counter. I was like, I'm done. And just walked away. And they all sat there horrified because they didn't know if this skunk was loaded or not.
Yeah.
Turns out it had been a pet. It had been like de-skunked.
Yeah.
And so is that the
pet?
I think that's a technical term.
I think so, yeah.
De-skunked.
Yeah, no skunk stomping. But so, this was a pet. So they, but they didn't know that. It'd be like if someone put a gun down, you don't know if it's loaded or not, right? Same.
So this guy could not take care of his pet skunk and just decided to get rid of it.
Yeah, I don't know if it was his, but he burdened it on the zoo. Anyway, that's not the story I was going to tell. That's just a fun skunk story. The actual story is that my friend Clint was walking through the zoo near the giraffes over there with a reporter from the Oklahoman. And as they were walking, he saw a man who was there with his 2 children go over to one of the trees, like across the walk, and like grab a branch that's about an inch and a half in diameter, like roughly the size of these microphones, and like just start shaking it until he broke it off, like hanging on it, broke it off. It's like a 10-foot branch. Holds it into the giraffe enclosure and is like, hey, come here. And so the giraffe comes over and just like takes it and picks it up, and the guy's holding it like at a V and doesn't let go. He's just like, whoa, and it pulls him into the giraffe exhibit or whatever.
That's amazing.
And drops him down. Amazing. And then he's like, hey. And so my friend Clint looks at the reporter and says, please don't take any photos of this. So to get the guy out. And I was like, what happened? Did he get banned from the zoo? And they said, no, we gave him like a free year pass because he was like, it shouldn't have been possible. There's no science. I was like, you gave this man a free pass to the zoo for a year because he was dumb enough to feed a giraffe with a indigenous Oklahoma tree. Right. No. Like, listen, if it's my zoo, get the hell out.
Well, it's a good thing he didn't have a gun.
He could. Yeah, this could have ended differently.
That's why we need 2010, House Bill 2010.
Well, you don't want to scare the animals.
Right.
So.
Right.
That's true. As you're packing heat.
Yeah, they might run on you or something.
Post like, it's totally reasonable.
The other thing I was going to put is, and this is this is the backdrop as well of 2597, and there's a lot of there's a lot of things that you could paint as the backdrop of passing this bill, but this is close to me because of what I do when I'm not on the podcast. The Frontier, which is an independent journalism website out of Tulsa, kind of like an online newspaper kind of situation. They do really great investigative reporting. They've got an article published this week called "In the Line of Fire." Children injured and killed by firearms in Oklahoma is on the rise. So between 2000 and 2017, the rate of pediatric firearm deaths, the rate of deaths from firearm-related injuries in children in Oklahoma has gone up by, anyone guess?
12%.
12?
30%.
30? Andrew?
42.
78.3.
Holy, us combined.
Yeah, 78.3.
Wow.
So
I hate when I'm wrong like that.
I know.
Yeah.
I
So
know.
almost, but not quite doubled. These are this is accidents, so accidental shootings, homicides, as well as self-inflicted gunshot deaths. So that's the backdrop against which we just elected to make guns, specifically handguns, I would argue, much more easy for people to obtain.
It is. Well, there were some changes in this law to the permitting process as well, which I didn't know until today during the Senate debate, and that was concerning. It's interesting to me. I mean, Scott, you and I talked a few weeks ago that in fact, I had the same conversation with a couple of folks from the ACLU at a coffee shop earlier this week that I think everybody and Liz and Bo, maybe you too, we all started this session thinking there's a whole bunch of new freshman legislators. Yeah. They are seem to be a pretty moderate bunch. This is going to be different. It's going to be a different year. We don't have a budget deficit. It's going to be a positive year. And that's not to say it's not going to be, but I was like, I think it's okay. And Scott, you pointed out that the first 2 weeks have been all guns and abortion. And I was like, yeah, that it does sound like business as usual for the Oklahoma legislature.
So Representative Mickey Dolenz on the television show on Sunday mornings with Senator
Flashpoint.
Bice, yes.
Yeah.
He made a comment, is this the message we want to send, that we want to fast track this bill? Where Senator Bice, she had a great response to that. She was like, this same exact bill was vetoed last year. Mm-hmm. And they've addressed some of the concerns from last year.
Right.
But I think the narrative inside the halls at the Capitol is that this moved really fast.
Yeah.
Really fast.
Well, and I read somewhere that, they likely wanted to get guns and abortion, the social issues of the year done, so they're not gumming up their ability to negotiate the budget here in a couple of months. Whether or not that's true.
I do think that there is some legitimacy to that. And I think, there was a couple of sessions ago where the Senate sine died early to avoid having to hear kind of the controversy around an abortion bill. And so I can see the validity of that. By no means a fan of it, but...
Right. And maybe to some degree, it's a way to placate those who are big champions of these, so they will fall in line down the road if they have to make difficult votes, like about budgetary things, such as passing a gross production tax on rocks.
Yeah. Well, from a Republican standpoint, I think the main issue was the reciprocity that other states have here. Yeah. I'm for the Second Amendment. I personally own firearms, but I would never advocate for someone to just, go buy one and walk around with it.
Right.
But I can see that argument. I definitely can. It's like, how is it fair that somebody can come from Arkansas or Louisiana or wherever and do this, but an Oklahoman can't? And I just the thing that sticks out about that argument for me is I want to see that in all future legislation. You know what I mean? If that's an argument for this, then on maybe the other side of the aisle, it's like, well, we did it for guns, and I don't have any examples.
Someone could
of
get.
that,
I mean, the obvious one to me is like someone could get Medicaid in another state, but they can't here. Well, how is that fair?
Right.
I mean, that's a in some ways a logical argument.
Totally. And my thing is too, and I agree with you. Like the reciprocity makes sense, except that like. We gave reciprocity, right? Like if you're like, well, I mean, we have to do it for Oklahomans now because like everybody else can't. Well, people from Texas, and
you could also not.
Yeah, you could also not do that. Right?
Oh, and I think Senator Hicks Senator Hicks from Senate District 40 today said, "Why won't we just get rid of that?"
Right.
I'm not advocating either way, but I do see that argument.
Right. And it's, to me, it's kind of the same deal with like, it's the same deal with the training. Like, I feel like the argument we heard again today from Senator David was like, well, I've taken the training and it's worthless, so let's just get rid of it. And it's like, or we could make the training not worthless, right? Like that's like
let's fix the things that are broken,
right?
Well, and Grant said that a couple of weeks ago. Grant Herms, when he was on here with us, that he took the training, and I was like, "How was it?" And he's like, "You can't fail as long as you can put the bullets in the gun and hit the target. You pass." And I was like, "Well, that's just a."
I mean, like I agree that the training, but I agree the training is terrible, but like. I think there was
not an argument for get rid of training.
Right.
That's like, let's
there was a tweet that I saw. There was a tweet I saw this week that showed a video of.
Yeah, that was me.
It should have been
at Bo Broadwater.
I forgot that we're on video, and I didn't know if you wanted me to like.
No, yeah. Please follow.
Say that it was you. That showed somebody didn't say their face, so I don't know if it was a man or a woman, but
it was a woman.
I presumed it was a woman, but I don't. I don't.
Good
know.
for you for not presuming.
I don't know how they identify themselves. It was a person who had a gun in a holster, and they were showing it to someone, and they took it out, and they could barely get it out of the holster. Then they pointed it at themselves, at their abdomen.
Did you see this, Liz?
As they were like,
I have not seen this.
It was like they pointed it at themselves, at their abdomen, as they are like removing the magazine
with a finger in the trigger guard.
Yes, right.
And talking about how there's one in the chamber all the time.
Yes, and it's like, do you hear the words coming out of your own mouth? Like it was remarkable. And then they put it back. They put the magazine back in. They put it back in the holster. And like could barely like get the holster, and it's like this is a person who had the training presumably because it's been required, and so yes, Yikes. A, clearly the training is worthless, but B, clearly people are not all responsible gun owners, and I would say that when you look at the 476 kids who have died from firearm related injuries in Oklahoma in the last 17 years, that belies that. Despite what we want to believe, not all firearm owners are responsible.
Oh, no, I would venture to say like there's quite a few that are not, especially when you start looking at statistics of the relationship between domestic violence and gun ownership. I mean, that's a huge reason why the Women's Coalition and some of our partners signed on to this effort against permitless carry, and, especially without any restrictions on permitless carry or protections because of the overwhelming, percentage of mass shootings that have a history of domestic violence, and the number of women who are murdered by men in Oklahoma because of access to weapons. So for us, it's like, let's not make that even easier and then allow these, batterers and abusers to have free access to weapons at any time that they use to kind of control and have that threat of violence over women.
Right. Is there a provision in this law that excludes people who have a documented history of domestic violence from acquiring firearms?
I don't think so.
I believe it is convicted felons.
Yeah, it's a convicted.
People with convicted felons and adjudicated mental illnesses.
Yes.
Okay.
Those two.
I knew those two. I couldn't remember if there was a domestic violence component as well. So, and that's, I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, there's a lot of folks that are, it's Oklahoma. Like, there's a lot of reasons to have firearms of varying degrees. I personally don't see a need for handguns. I mean, I understand people have them. I've shot one or several. Like, I kind of get it, but in my day-to-day life, I have no reason to have one. And I mean, it'd be cool to like hunt squirrels sometimes.
What if a monkey was trying to stomp you?
I mean,
Right, if you were going to get monkey stomped, you wish you had one.
Fair
then.
point. Now I'll
no, it's
reconsider.
you're the machete. The machetes are going to be
That's
fine.
true.
Right.
I have a machete. I remember as a child, though, I was 5-6 years old at my grandparents' house out in East Texas. They had several acres, and they had like my uncle's machete from when he was 5 or 6, and on like a belt, and I would just carry it around the woods and just like hack, vines and stuff down.
So my great uncle. So my dad's side of the family. They're from various places, but we had a lot of I don't think we do anymore. We had a lot of family out in Dover, which for
Delaware.
No. So if you go to Ishans, right? So Ishans is in Okarche, which is about 20-ish minutes south of Kingfisher. So if you go up to Kingfisher and then you just keep going north
toward Enid,
towards Enid, then you're going to run through a little town called Dover, and we had a lot of family in Dover, and they ran cattle. And so there was, I did not meet this gentleman, but my dad spent many summers working cattle with him, and so I believe him when he says they had a cattle hand who lived on their land. Like he had a little shack, and he was. That's like where he hunted for his food, and he ate squirrel, he ate possum, he ate like whatever, And my dad said they were hunting squirrel, and this guy like shot a squirrel and missed, and like I guess felt like the squirrel like personally like offended him,
like the squirrel dodged the bullet.
Like he was pissed. So the squirrel like scampers up a tree, right? And now this gets a little heavy.
Right.
The squirrel scampers up a tree and like disappears inside a hole. This dude puts his gun down, I'm sure in a safe manner, and like climbs up the tree to where the hole is, and starts banging on the side of the tree until the squirrel poked his head out, at which point he like chopped his head off with a hatchet. Like
That's like Sully from Dr. Quinn.
Yeah,
Like, you got to
like
Dr. Quinn.
took his Dr. Quinn, medicine woman, nicely done. Took that's like a circa 1993 reference right there.
Yeah.
Wow.
But anyway, took his head off and made sure that he really enjoyed that squirrel for dinner. Apparently, squirrel's greasy. I've not had it, but
It is.
according to the old man.
Yeah.
My mom's gonna like we talked about squirrel and Dr. Quinn in this episode.
But
all right, well,
all that
to
to say,
to pivot to the other
constitutional carry,
the other issue of the month, I will just as a quick aside, I think February sucks. And I had this discussion on Twitter a little while ago. I know Anna Facci disagrees. That's fine. Her birthday's in February, and
So
it is
is mine.
Is it really?
Yeah.
It's also
Happy
my mother's
birthday.
birthday.
Pisces.
Happy birthday.
Would you change to another month if you could?
That's an interesting question because
That's
I
a
typically, I would consider it because I typically get gypped one way or the other. Like
Right.
it's very rare that, and I'm like a weather person. Like I'm pretty impacted by weather, and like I've had snow days on my birthday of like crazy rain blizzards, and then like it's just I don't know, but I'm kind of partial to it now.
If you could change to a different month, which month would you choose?
I think I'd probably choose September or October. I feel
Okay.
like those are solid. Is that you?
Scott.
That's Scott.
So I'm a mid-December birthday,
Oh, okay.
which it's fine. I don't feel strongly about it, but I think an October birthday would be pretty
Yeah.
sweet.
It's
What is that? What is that? Like Virgo? What's the?
I have no idea.
Oh yeah, you're men.
I believe I'm a.
I literally could not care less.
Does Sagittarius sound right for December?
I have no idea.
I feel like
Yes.
Sagittarius
I
or
have no idea.
I don't know. I feel like somebody in middle school told me Sagittarius or Capricorn, but I don't remember.
I don't have any. I'm an Aries. I know that, but just barely in March.
Don't pretend like you don't care then.
I don't care. I don't know what that means. Is Aries a bull? That's Taurus. Also a Ford.
Aries is
I really don't know.
war, god of war, right?
Maybe.
You're a very warlike
It
person.
seems like it, right?
Yeah. The machetes and
The
stuff.
machetes, the Ninja Turtle
So
reference.
why does February suck? Why do you not?
I don't. It's what I said on Twitter earlier today was that it's the Tuesday of the months. Then like it's January, you're like it's a new year, all right? And then you're like, dang it! And Tuesday's weather. February's weather always sucks.
It
I feel
does
like
always suck.
and I felt this way for a number of years. So apologies to everyone. My mom's birthday is early in February, and we almost always forget. Like when I was growing up, we would often forget her birthday because it was close-ish to Christmas. So like Mother's Day, we'd make it up by like buying her a TV and stuff. She'd be like, I got a card. I'm like, happy birthday. And so I just feel like February is always a hard month. It's really busy at work for us every year. That's probably part of it.
Totally. You've forgotten about Christmas. You can't envision summer.
Right.
Like there's just like
the deal.
There's just like nothing there.
Well, and also like Valentine's Day is terrible.
Yes.
Because I want, like, secretly deep down, I love Valentine's Day. Like I want to just dive into the pool of Valentine's Day, but I will never let myself because I have self-respect. But like I'm a hypocrite. So I just end up being pissed the entire day at everyone.
Right.
And it's
it's so, even if you successfully pull off like a Valentine's thing, it's like really stressful. It's really expensive. It's really crowded.
Yeah. Well, it's like the New Year's Eve of like you have all these ridiculous expectations that you will never meet them.
New Year's Eve is also overrated.
Agreed.
I would agree with that. I'm going to come back to that. But first, before I forget, there is an interesting data point here. There was a survey.
This is a
very
Scott thing to say.
Either by like Gallup or Monmouth, one of the two did a survey. If you were guessing, now I totally stole this from another podcast, so I can't take
so
credit.
538.
It is. But if you were guessing, what percentage of Americans said that they had a good Valentine's Day? What would you guess?
Less than 20%.
12%.
I was actually going to say 13.
So we have 12, 13, and like something less than 20.
Yeah.
87% of Americans.
What?
Which tells me
They're lying.
Yes, that 5% of Americans are liars.
Yeah.
Well, maybe they just
100%.
don't care. I mean, if I'm being honest, like mine was fine. I wouldn't say, but it was just we didn't do anything.
So like any survey, when the numbers make sense, you have to look at methodology. And they didn't give them an option, right?
Jiminy Christmas. Was there not like a bad option?
No, you couldn't say I don't know. You had to pick good or bad.
I heard this on this. I heard
that
this was on this week's.
faulty.
You had to pick
Faulty poll.
right. You had to pick good or bad, and so a majority of people clearly don't want to say I had a bad Valentine's Day because that sounds depressing.
Right.
And I mean, for anyone listening who knows my wife, like she would rarely rate any day above mediocre, I think, or like marginals. Like she definitely moderates her opinions of days, and I think that applies to Valentine's as well.
I would also say that I agree with you that New Year's Eve is largely overrated. I have always felt that way, and like hardcore. And then I spent New Year's Eve in Prague.
Well,
and so if you ever get the chance,
You are being really obnoxious.
if you ever get the chance to go to the Czech Republic and be in Prague on New Year's Eve, you'll be like, oh, this is awesome.
Scott is the biggest coastal elite I know that's from Oklahoma.
He totally is.
I like to travel.
Well, when I spent the New Year's Eve in Prague. This is like that
Maybe
Friends episode.
If you did, you'd understand.
I was hiking in the foothills of the whatever.
That's such a great episode.
I think the last New Year's Eve that I went out was the first opening night. Wasn't that like 2009?
I remember. Because it was not 2009 because I went to opening night in high school.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So this would have been like 1997.
I'm way off there. But either way, it was freezing outside, and it was my first New Year's in Oklahoma. Maybe that's what it was. Yeah. But I was like, this is way too cold.
Yeah. I feel like every year it's really cold. I've never been because I'm always like, maybe this year we'll go. And then it's like, nah. All right, well. Now that we did have other things we were going to talk about. We've warmed ourselves with these happy conversations. We should one week have a non-political podcast and just talk about like giraffes. Our
feelings.
Our feelings. Yeah.
Prague.
I'm a therapist. I can talk about
astrology.
Prague. Ooh.
Anyone's going to think, please don't judge me. I don't really care about astrology. It was mostly a joke. Sorry.
If anyone knows you, they know that's true. If they don't, now they do.
I think it's actually really interesting too, though. Like, I mean, like, I don't like put stock in like horoscopes, but I think it's interesting that for like such a long time, that's how societies like organized their like thought process.
I thought for a split second you said horoscopes, and I thought that is up your alley as a physician. All right. On that note, let's move on. So,
But
yeah, there's a rim shot here somewhere.
Don't push the buttons.
hit the
Oh,
right
you got
button.
it.
I clicked. It worked. So the last thing we want to talk about on our list, and we kind of want to. This might pivot a little bit into to listen to your agenda, because we really want to hear what's important to the Oklahoma Women's Coalition this year. You took over that position last year, right?
Yeah, September 2017.
Okay, so a little
Yeah.
over. So you've had one full legislative session under
I
your
haven't.
belt.
I've aged 25 years.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
She's not just had one. She's had one and then 2 special sessions, right?
That's right.
Oh,
yeah, dude.
She's
Yeah.
in her 4th session.
She's
That's right.
She's a schooled veteran.
It's the Tuesday of sessions, I hear. And so, so we want to talk about abortion, because that has been the other dominant, I think, topic in this year so far, as it is most every year. So there've been a number of kind of bills related to this. Tensions have been running high at the Capitol about this. Senate Bill 13 was denied a hearing. I forget what that bill even did.
It would criminalize abortion for the woman
yes.
and the doctor, which is pretty serious.
Also the
so-
infant.
Just getting
Everyone's
rid of it
fault.
altogether. Yeah.
So
yeah.
SB 13 by Senator Silk would have reclassified abortion as murder and outlawed abortion in all circumstances for any reason. It's a Senate bill. It was assigned to the Health
And
Committee,
Human
Public Health,
Services.
Health and Human Services Committee, and it became public late last week, I think, that it was going to be denied a hearing, so it's not even going to be heard or voted on a committee.
Yeah.
Senator Treat, who is the pro tem of the Senate, said we're not going to hear this. The chair, which is Smalley, I think,
Yeah.
right?
Smalley,
yeah.
Senator Smalley and Senator Treat said we're not going to hear this because we know this is not
It's
constitutional.
going to get challenged.
It's going to be challenged immediately. There'll be an injunction. We're not going to do it. So,
Which, kudos for reason,
Right.
That was nice
Because-
that we hedged that off.
Right.
But
Because
that's a low bar, but
Well,
I'll
yeah,
take it.
constitutionality should be a higher bar.
well, we're coming back to that. But,
Right.
But instead, they heard SB 195 on Monday.
Is this the trigger bill?
Trigger bill. So trigger bill. This means that in the event that Roe v. Wade is overturned, or there is a constitutional amendment passed at the federal level that specifically bans abortion, if either one of those two things happen, which if a constitutional amendment passes that bans abortion, it's unclear to me why this would be necessary. But if Roe v. Wade is overturned or there's a constitutional amendment banning abortion, then Oklahoma's abortion laws would return to what was in place prior to 1973, where abortion was illegal.
Right.
So that was heard in Health and Human Services. It passed along party lines, and I assume will be heard on the Senate floor.
I'll say even this, an abortion bill with a trigger, has a gun reference. So it really was these
definitely.
two issues. That's my observation.
And so I'm going to say this last thing, and then I'm going to shut up. But one thing that I think just needs to be said. So I listened to all of the debate over this bill, and someone needs to sit down with Senator Silk, and I'm happy to do it. If Senator Silk is listening, we can have this conversation.
I volunteer, as tribute.
But just kind of a quick lesson in basic civics. Contrary to what we heard on Monday, the Supreme Court actually does decide what's constitutional and what's not. That's literally their whole job. That is what they do. We heard over and over again that the Supreme Court was overstepping their authority by saying that the Constitution protects the right to abortion in Roe v. Wade and in Casey v. Planned Parenthood, which is another case that kind of reaffirmed Roe in 1992. 3-2? Something like that.
Yes.
Early 90s. We heard over and over from Senator Silk that the Supreme Court can't do that. That's beyond their authority. No, that's literally why they exist. The Supreme Court is the final arbiter of what is constitutional and what's not. If they say it's constitutional, it is, unless you change the Constitution. If they say it's not, then it's not, unless you change the Constitution. Fortunately, Senator Treat, who I would disagree with on any number of issues, was there speaking for his bill and corrected Senator Silk on that. But
Yeah.
I think it is illustrative to me that we have now reached the place where we have elected officials who are either they either don't understand basic civics, or they are being purposely disingenuous about how the process works for the purposes of political gain. Well, and in either case, it's completely unacceptable.
It is. It's dangerous because this is an extremely emotional topic. I mean, regardless of where you fall on the issue, you're going to have some sort of an emotional attachment to it. So what we saw throughout the first weeks of session, and especially at this committee meeting, was an extremely emotionally charged dynamic in the room and with protesters. I literally had a man's spit on my face and like, to be clear, we are taking, like, the Women's Coalition has not taken a position on any of the abortion bills. And I'm just happen to be like sitting in a spot of being by Planned Parenthood people. And so like I'm associated with them. And so walking out and he is like spitting in my face, telling me that abortion is murder, lady. And I'm like, this is a lesson in what happens when you kind of spread this irresponsible vitriol, and you have a base that doesn't necessarily educate themselves on what is constitutional and what all of the parameters around that. And so it just feeds this like emotional energy, and it's really toxic. And really counterproductive. I mean, you had Treat and Silk standing there kind of just trying to out pro-life each other, and them chanting unseat Treat. And I'm like, he's saving, I'm by no means backing 195, but in this situation, the basis of him, ensuring that SB 13 would not get a hearing is like, it will immediately be challenged. It always has been anytime this has been brought up in the past with us or anyone else. So let's just save ourselves all the embarrassment. And everyone's just like, you work for us. You should represent our voice, and I'm enraged at this. And then, Silk does the classic, like, 20 babies are dying when you go home to your family and have dinner, and we just keep sitting here at committee meeting, and the next day 20 more, and it's just so irresponsible. Mm-hmm. Regardless of where you fall, that is not the way to conduct a conversation over an extremely controversial policy.
Yeah, so and this was like really not controversial, but like a lot of heat on both sides, right? So like the far right didn't support some of this, and like you said, they were chanting unseat Treat. Was this like maybe not Silk's group, but this was like
it was the SB 13 group for sure.
So like the far
this was the
right.
like the
Oklahomans for Life, I think, right?
Yeah, it was the group that got the billboard in Smalley's district, and they're going hard.
There's one on I-40.
Yeah,
I mean it was ugly.
Yeah,
it was really, and they were both against the bill.
Right.
Like I think you
were
about
different,
to say. It's
for different reasons.
different reasons, but they were both against the bill. But it's like, so I happened to be there when they walked out, and again, at Bo Broadwater on Twitter, I actually, I heard, I mean, just this, for people, and I'm not saying they were all like that, but for people who claim to be Christ-like, they weren't being very Christ-like to the Planned Parenthood people.
No, they weren't.
And again, I'm not saying where I stand on this issue. I don't think that, well, I'll tell you, as a man, I don't think I should have a voice in this issue. That's my personal opinion on that. I do have feelings about it, but as a man, I'm just going to shut up about it. And I think that's probably the best thing to do when it comes to abortion, especially one that I am not involved in at all, But either way, it's like I was just really disappointed with how it's like the anger towards Treat and towards that committee meeting, and then they turned towards one another, and it was really ugly.
I mean, and being as objective as I possibly can, but it's hard to be as a woman, and it's hard to be as an advocate for women's issues and access to women to healthcare for women. I cannot say enough positive things about the way that reproductive justice advocates maintain their composure and are respectful and are responsible in their messaging, and also just in how they carry themselves. It's scary. I mean, like I said, literally had a man spit on my face. And they're proudly wearing, the shirt of their, and kind of their messaging, as their role as reproductive justice advocates. And I was sitting there, kind of watching them as this whole like huge angry mob was happening outside the committee meeting, debating on, if they could get up and go to the bathroom, if it was safe for them, how long they should wait until they can leave, because they just get attacked and mobbed by this group. So to your point about not necessarily being Christ-like, I agree. And there was a ram's horn.
You mentioned this when I texted you about coming on the show today.
Like, like the burr, 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 like the walls of Jericho look.
That's all I've got. I'm sorry. That's
not what that is.
The walls of Jericho. Yeah. Why? Were they marching and playing the thing?
There was some marching. There was some chanting.
Because Trey and those guys have done a great job with the restoration, and I think it's a pretty secure building at this point.
Well, I think Bo, your point, and again, not to take a position on like the issue of abortion, but just like to your point about how people conduct themselves on, when we talk about this issue, Senator Treat said in debate, he said, I've been called names, I've been told I'm going to hell, I've been called a murderer, I've been called a baby killer.
My Christianity has been brought into question. Yeah.
And I mean, if I could have said anything to him in that moment, it was, hey bro, next time you're talking about this issue, remember that.
Yeah.
Remember that when you're talking to people that disagree with you, right? Remember that when you're talking to the supporters that do agree with you. Remember what that felt like. Like, remember what that felt like to have all these things that you hold, like, personally, that are dear to you, called into question because of what a policy difference that you have on this issue. I think if more people had that approach when we talk about this, we would get a lot farther.
Yeah, I think civility goes a long way.
Oh, well, exactly. On any issue, there is no reason that you should ever feel the way I'm sure those Planned Parenthood people felt in the Capitol. It no matter what the issue is. And in my personal opinion on people who get angry, and you have every right to get angry, you have every right to yell, but when you do that, your message is completely lost.
Yeah.
And as if I were an elected official, if I'm walking through there, you aren't going to get the time of day from me. And I mean, that's not me being elitist or anything, but I cannot sit there and listen to somebody yelling and spitting on my face because we're not going to have dialogue. It's just impossible.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, Bo, to go back just real quick, as a gun owner, we talked about that issue a few minutes ago. And I feel like it probably happens in the reverse sometimes. The people like accuse every gun owner of being a murderer or some kind of rhetoric along those lines. I mean, certainly there are fringe on every issue, right? And so do you feel like have you seen that same kind of thing at play in the reverse?
That people who are pro-gun are accused of being murderers?
Yeah.
Not in Oklahoma. I think you have a huge percentage of gun owners in Oklahoma. I think the people who are completely against owning guns is a very small percentage in Oklahoma.
Sure,
totally.
Plus, you don't want to piss off a gun owner.
But I think the percentage of pro Second Amendment Oklahomans is much higher against open carry without training than what a lot of people are saying.
Mm-hmm. Totally. I looked for that poll and I can't find it, but I know I've seen it.
Yeah. Liz, before as kind of the ending note here, tell us a little bit about the Women's Coalition. For any listeners who don't know that it is a thing, and what's on, like, what issues you care about and what's on the agenda for this year.
Sure. So the Women's Coalition was founded to essentially kind of be that day-to-day presence at the Capitol during session for women's issues. As any Let's Fix This supporter and follower would know, unless you stay consistently engaged in the process, it's highly likely that the issues that are important to you are not going to be represented every single day by decision makers. So that's what we do. We take issues that are impacting women and girls throughout Oklahoma, particularly those, disenfranchised communities, and translate those hurdles and those obstacles into policy. And then we register ourselves as lobbyists and storm the marble dungeon and go and try to make a bunch of white men care about women's issues. So super easy, right. Super stress-free.
What could go wrong?
This session, we kind of focus on 4 main policy areas: health and wellness, alternatives to incarceration, violence prevention, and economic security. So obviously with the climate around criminal justice reform, we have prioritized a whole lot of the reform efforts, specifically those impacting incarcerated women and incarcerated mothers. Over 80% of currently incarcerated women are mothers. So we're looking at those targeted policies that will impact that demographic.
Say that again.
Yeah, could you repeat that stat one more time?
Over 80% of women currently incarcerated in Oklahoma are moms
That
who
is
have
crazy.
kids under the age of 18.
And that means their kids are not with them.
Correct.
So-
And that means the likelihood of those kids finding themselves in intersecting with the criminal justice system are highly exacerbated. So we are looking at a couple of different things within reform. Obviously, we're a really close partner with the Oklahomans for Criminal Justice Reform and ACLU and others who are really leading the charge on that, a very aggressive reform front. So cash bail reform, retroactivity of State Question 780, cite and release. There are some dozens of reform bills. The titles have all been stricken, which... yeah, that's a whole other podcast. But one of our main reform bills is failure to protect reform. Right now, there is within the criminal code, a charge of failure to protect. So there's a litany of child abuse charges in the criminal code. This particular one deals with situations where the mother, and sure, it's like the parent, but it's 98% mothers, some abuse or injury has occurred to the child that they themselves are not culpable of. They did not commit, that it happened kind of quote unquote on their watch. They can be charged with a sentence. And often we're finding where DAs or judges are using the threat of a failure to protect charge to incentivize that mother to testify against the batterer. But for all of the reasons, all of the nuance and the layers and the complexities that we know about domestic violence and how difficult it is for that woman to identify, A, I'm a victim here, B, I should absolutely testify against this, batterer, and really advocate for herself and her family. It's just not that black and white. It's not that straightforward. So, we have cases, dozens and dozens of cases where women are currently incarcerated for failure to protect for not like probation and a couple of years in DHS, child welfare intervention, but like 30, 40, 50-year sentences when they weren't even home, when there was threat to their own life, or they were locked out of the house, or, any sort of given, very traumatic circumstances. We are by no means trying to decriminalize child abuse. We are trying to ensure kind of protect domestic violence victims from being incarcerated so we can truly rehabilitate families. Because does that mother need help and access to services? 100%. Does there need to be intervention on behalf of the kids? Yes. Does that need to look like incarcerating and separating families? No. Surely we can do better than that for Oklahoma kids and for mothers. So, super easy to legislate discrimination and bias. There are judges who just really subscribe to the belief, and DAs who subscribe to the belief of you should have known better. And there's so many implicit biases and kind of subconscious discrimination things happening with regard to women and mothers in Oklahoma. There's a reason we have the highest female incarceration rate. It's not because terrible women live here and do terrible things. So this has for sure been the hardest policy issue I've ever worked on because it's so nuanced and it's so complex, because we're literally having to look people in the eye and say, wow, you just really hate women, don't you? Like, it's
I feel like, and I mean, as you know, 3 dudes sitting here, but I have appreciated my friendship with you because you one of many women in my life, but have helped highlight how issues are different for women, or what issues are women's issues that I might not have thought of. I mean, there's some that you're like, oh, obviously, like reproductive things are maybe more angled at that, but there are a lot of things that are nuanced in ways. And so like criminal justice reform is, when you see the stats, you realize it's a huge deal, right? Like, you know, I work in HIV care, and a big chunk of new HIV infections are among young women of color, and it's becoming an increasingly female issue, but it doesn't get a lot of press. And so like I'm like, oh, well, that's, now I get it, like in a different way.
And there's so many like layers, and our institutions are working exactly the way they're designed to discriminate against exactly the people they're designed to discriminate against. And then we criticize those exact people for falling behind. Right. And it's like, there was no other domino pattern, like other than them to end up in these situations. So for us, it's like all about going back to the root of the issue, which is, let's talk about trauma. Let's talk about adverse experiences. Let's talk about the fact that your baseline of normal is necessarily distorted when you grow up in poverty and abuse and violence around substances. And I mean, I've been in really shitty relationships, and I've made really, I'm like, I look back and I'm like, why did I do that? So take that that any person can relate to, and like exacerbate, multiply times 10, right, 20, 30 of like, that's just been all you've ever known. So then to be able to put the onus on her to have to advocate for herself and get a great job and, support her family and not rely on substances to kind of like alleviate some of this, the stress, the toxic stress associated with trauma. No human can do what the burden that we're placing on women to do by the things that we have put on them. So that's a big one for us. Super popular issue, pissing off every DA in Oklahoma right now.
It's so important though. Like the whole time you've been sitting here talking, like, I've just been like listening, but as I kind of like was getting here, like ready to say something, and then you started saying exactly what I was thinking about, was like, it's about childhood trauma. It's about toxic stress. It's about adverse childhood experiences. Yeah. And it's about understanding that people who grow up in those situations, it's not even that they need to be taught like how, like, it's not that they need to be like taught how to overcome that. Right. Like, I mean, that's one way I guess to think about it, but it's even more beyond that. It's that their brains didn't develop the way that they're supposed to develop, right?
Yes.
Their brains literally don't function the way that they would have had they grown up in situations where they had a parent who was incarcerated, where there weren't substances in the house, where they didn't witness domestic violence, where they weren't a victim of domestic violence themselves. Yeah. Like, if they hadn't grown up in those situations, their brains would have developed in a completely different way, and they would respond to stress entirely differently and arguably much healthier. Like it's, and I cannot imagine the job that you have trying to, because it's hard trying to talk about that to policymakers, even like as a pediatrician, when you're talking about like what we need to be doing for our kids.
Right.
I cannot even imagine the burden that you have, or the barrier you have to overcome when you're talking about this, like for adults who are incarcerated, or who you look at them on paper and they have all these patterns.
Well, exactly. And that is like Oklahoma's message to women, is what I felt for a long time, is the message of, you should have known better. It's the like women's equivalent of pull yourself up by your bootstraps, of like, how could you, I would have never let this happen to my kids, or I would have never found myself in this abusive relationship, or I would have never found myself addicted to drugs, or, selling drugs to put food on the table for my kids. Like, just this us versus them, and trying to legislate that, and trying to write policies and hold decision makers accountable for things that they aren't even aware of are playing into their decision making. So yeah, I cry a lot. No.
Well, that's so say we all. That's not a bad thing. It sounds like a really stressful job and heavy and important. Yeah. What would you? Maybe we'll end on a positive note because we've had a really heavy episode. I feel like with lots of latent anger. Liz, what's the best part of your job?
That is super easy. The best part of my job is before I was in this position, I had no idea how many people were fighting for equity, for justice, being able to learn from them and be comforted by them, be encouraged and supported by them and inspired by them. I mean, there are so many amazing people doing this important work. And so there are so many times that I kind of can get in this silo mentality of like, man, I'm just really on an island. And like, if, you know, I hear stories and I talk to women at Mabel Bassett, incarcerated at Mabel Bassett, and they're like, thank you for what you're doing. You're giving us hope because we feel like someone cares. Someone's telling our stories. Someone's magnifying our voices and fighting for us. Thank you. And that's really encouraging. It can also be super overwhelming where you're like, holy shit, if I don't do this work, no one's going to tell their stories. But that's just simply not true. Right. I mean, there are so many awesome organizations and people who are deeply invested and who cry at bars like I do in the evenings because this work is really, really, our social justice work in Oklahoma is just really hard. And you have to kind of set this different standard and expectation for what is a win. But policy is necessarily slow. It should be. Right. But that doesn't mean that we aren't making progress and that there aren't people fighting for these causes every single day. So, yeah. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you. Bo, thank you for being here with us as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks for teaching me about monkey stomping, Right. And apparently I have to spend New Year's Eve in Prague now. So,
dude, Prague is awesome.
I'm sure it is. I don't know what else to say. Scott, thanks for being here too. If you haven't already gone online to rate and subscribe to our podcast, please do that. Remember that Let's Pod This is a production of Let's Fix This. It's edited and produced by Scott and I. Sorry, I'm trying to move the faders while I talk, and it's not working so well today. My brain's a little fried from a long week. Subscribe to us on Facebook, facebook.com/letsfixthisok. Hit us up on Twitter at Let's Fix This Okay. Same handle on Instagram. Scott is at SC Melson. I'm at Andy OKC. Bo is at Bo Broadwater. Liz is, sorry. You should work now.
At BHL Wagoner.
BHL?
Mm-hmm.
All right, there
Bennett,
you go.
Hudson, Liz. Those are my boys. Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's very thoughtful. I've not named mine after my kids. But props to having a kid named Hudson.
Yeah.
Those are the best kids. Also all the other ones. Let's Fix This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit organization who strives to educate and equip all Oklahomans to engage with the government. We encourage you to get involved in any way that you can. Remember, decisions are made by those who show up. Have a great week.